Welcome to Use Your Items, a video game blog and podcast brought to you by Jason and Francisco. Fran, how you doing today?
Good. How about yourself? Excited to talk about this game that nobody has ever talked about before. Very cult classic.
Yeah, it's we're treading new ground. We're going to talk about Starfield. No, we're not talking about Starfield. Today we're talking about the one, the only, the incredible Ocarina of Time. Maybe one of the most famous games ever produced, ever developed. Iconic, incredible, unique, monolithic in a way, and yet very common. Like, I feel like everybody has some sort of relationship with Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
Good or bad, mostly good.
You mentioned popular. I wonder how true that still holds now that we're entering this age of the video games are entering essentially like middle-aged adulthood sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if that's I wouldn't be surprised if that's not a thing anymore, right? Like if you go to the normal gamer and ask them what is considered the best or one of the most important games of all time, I wonder how many people would answer Ocarina of Time in this day and age.
I think that's a really cool point, and it brings up a topic of audience. And so when I think of the blog and the articles that I write, they're not directed at millennials and Gen X.
Yeah.
And yet I think they have an implicit audience of millennials and Gen X. I think that as a millennial, I don't really have a voice or a guidance or a track or a lane that sort of leads me to Gen Z necessarily.
Yeah.
And I do agree. I'm very curious as to what does Gen Z see as an iconic, monolithic, popular, important video game?
Yeah.
I mean, this came out in 90. It started development in 95, so I was 5 and you were younger.
I was 2.
Yeah, so it's, I don't know. I don't know for a game that came out in 98 what it really means to be like the most. I mean, I feel like we're getting a little off track. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So for the listener at home, I'll say that at least myself, and I think Fran, you echoed this a little bit, I was feeling a little nervous talking about this because of the whole what more is there to say about a game that's been so prolifically discussed as Ocarina of Time, and yet here we are already getting off track. So I think we're set up for something good today. So
I think that the good way of ending this / what my feelings are from a popularity versus critical acclaim and everything is that this might be video game Citizen Kane, where
interesting.
If you had to guess, go to any critic worth their salt of film and talk to them, okay, what is one of the best films or one of the most iconic or one of the most important films to filmmaking, Citizen Kane is up there, right?
Right.
But if I had to guess, most people have not seen Citizen Kane, right? Like,
100%,
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
I have not either. I just know about the famous rocket sled in that movie, probably more than I know anything else about it.
Wait. Well, I'm not gonna get off track. That just made me want to watch that movie. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna piss off all of our film buff and our film history viewers and listeners here, but I believe Citizen Kane is something of a futurist or some technologist or something like that, and he has some crazy cockamamie idea that ends in it like a rocket-powered sled, basically. I don't know. I'll get hate mail for that. You can send it to useyouritems@gmail.com. But better yet, comment on one of my blog posts. I'll take engagement all day. And yeah, so I mean, I think you're right, and I think a lot of critics would point to this as that sort of incredibly important watershed moment in gaming, a la Super Mario 64, like we discussed last episode, that is so singularly important that it can't really be understated in the history and critical development of video games as a medium.
Yeah, totally.
So to kind of get us on a track, not maybe the track, like in our other segments and our other episodes, I got this idea to play this for my blog where I'm featuring for at least the next year. I'm going to try to hit it. We're going to play together now a number of video games that I sourced from my friends and people that my loved ones and things like that. Video games that were extremely important to them for one reason or another. It could have been a childhood favorite, a classic, something they felt was important. And so we've covered Final Fantasy VII, we've covered Banjo-Kazooie, we're playing Undertale right now, with spoilers for later. And on the blog, you can follow back, you can read back and see that I've written about Obra Dinn, and also, well, I think that might be the only other one that I think that was the only other one.
And Kingdom Hearts, right? Chain of Memories.
That's not on there, but it should be.
Shoot. Might be.
That's okay. I mean, it's on the blog.
Spoilers.
But it's not part of the series, technically.
Gotcha,
there's a lot of other cool articles that I wrote on there, some interesting stuff. The Forgotten City, Chain of Memories is on there. I have a really interesting piece about, or at least I think it's interesting before I toot my own horn too much. I wrote about Tetris Effect Connect and how it basically made me cry. And it's probably one of the most beautiful games I've ever played, but that's another story, another podcast, another episode, another day. So that's kind of the impetus for this. So I'd like to start it off with a couple of thoughts from some of my friends who thought that this was a really important piece to bring. And so thanks, Mike. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Anthony, for commenting and adding your voice to this. And a lot of what they said was this childhood nostalgia. I think a lot of it was rooted in the sense of, I played this as a kid. Some of my friends were afraid of the game. They found it like a very terrifying experience. It's so open. There's a lot of crazy things that happen. Some of the characters are particularly terrifying, a Re-Dead or something like that, or a like. And it's this critical piece of their childhood. It's something that they have specific memories associated with playing. And in a way, it's something that it's a game that created this freedom of atmosphere and this freedom to explore that was maybe really unexpected and unseen previously, at least in a 3D space.
Yeah.
And so it removed a lot of limits while creating new ones, and that opened up a lot of imagination and joy from the player, from my friends when they were kids.
And I think that shouldn't go understated. The 3D portion of it, it's not just that it was what feels like to be the first time that we explore a 3D space with a sense of wonder. It pretty much is I can't think of any other 3D exploration games before it. I can't imagine what those games would be like or what those games are because of such an impact that Ocarina of Time has made on the genre. And it seems to me so powerful that this game was able to, from the get-go, hit that. Because I don't want to go as far as to say this is the first 3D exploring game, because I haven't done the research. Maybe there is some other game that I am not remembering. But the fact that it is Nintendo's first whack at it, the fact that it is, if nothing else, even if the game is now were to be considered not aged well, which it isn't the case, but let's say it hasn't, the people say it didn't age well, you can't take away from it the fact that, my goodness, what a home run on your first swing. Yeah. This is like a rookie entering the big leagues, their first time at bat, they get thrown a fastball and their first swing is just a home run. It's like, oh my God, how do you do this on your first go? So I wanted to like make sure that is something that, if this is something that that more younger millennials or Gen Z are listening to, I think that is the key thing that I would want to impart. I guess this is kind of early to kind of give like a closing statement like this of this level, but
it's a guiding thesis.
It's a guiding thesis where it is amazing. Games like this are so easy to screw up. Many games after this have screwed up
Yeah.
in this. And it being just laying down the groundwork, being, you know what, this is how most mechanics, there are, of course, some mechanics that have not aged well, but for the most part, it set down the groundwork saying, this is how we are going to enter the third dimension.
Yeah. I think that you really captured a lot of what makes this game so seminal and so important for so many people, and why it's something that's worth revisiting, even in a day and age where 3D exploration is maybe, I think, certainly taken for granted.
Yeah.
To the point of its proliferation just in the marketplace. I mean, we are saturated with games that arguably descend almost directly from this experience. And something I'd like to get into later on, I think, is sort of the direct thread that you can draw between Ocarina to Elden Ring to Dark Souls or anything like that, and to the point where, you know, Miyazaki is directly quoted into as to saying this, right? So it's not like I'm not really making like a crazy statement here, but it's a really wild piece, because I mean, it does come out after Super Mario 64, right? It comes out after Banjo-Kazooie. It comes out after a lot of these early breakout hits on the N64 that kind of set the stage for what is possible and what this console can do, in spite of its hardware limitations versus the PS1, in spite of the limitations that being on a cartridge proves versus being on a CD, on a disc, like the PS1 or the Sega Saturn.
I would say,
I don't remember.
Hot take, I think that the reason it works so well is because it's on a cartridge. Because it's on a cartridge, the loading times are so much faster. Then, yeah, you can have much more space and much more fidelity in a CD. But you also have to have a physical moving piece reading the disc, and that is what led to long load times in PS1 games and PS2 games. Really? So cartridge games being flash-based, where they can have access to the memory more quickly, that's how they got away with so much, being able to just jump into a new world and load in the level. Like, if you think about Mario just jumping in through the portraits onto the other map. Yes, there is a bit of a loading screen. There's that and like it shows you what star you're doing before getting in. But if you do that relative to how much a loading screen on a Gran Turismo game was to load in the racetrack, you needed to wait and for the bar to get full. And I think that leads to Ocarina of Time allowing the player having a sense of freedom, of not dissociating with the game every time you go through a gate to enter Hyrule, the Hyrule Square, right? You go in and you're immediately in, barely any loading time between the two. And if there is a loading time, it's hidden between another smaller level before you enter the bigger level, right? And all these different things. Yeah, the game is incredibly smooth, and that lends itself well to exploration, right? I can not feel like sometimes it's happened to me a bunch of times on PS1 game, PS2 games, where I'm like, oh, did I explore that other place? Oh, but then I'm going to have to go back through that door, and that'll cause a loading screen. And you know what? I'm not even going to bother. If there's items there, they're gone. They don't exist. They're not in memory. They don't exist. But in Ocarina of Time, that's not the case, right? Oh, it's over there. Oh, okay. It's only going to take me 30 seconds to jump over to this other screen, check that, and then, okay, no, I'm good, or no, I'm not good, and go back. If anything, there is design issues where it's not easy for you to just go back and check something out. But from a technical perspective, it does, and it's crazy, and it's 100% true. It's true that PlayStation 1 did have more power, did have more memory, and it was easier to work with than the N64. at the same time, I do want to give a little bit of a I guess a props to the N64 by sticking to cartridges, because it does allow them to do these things that other consoles wouldn't be allowed. So it's kind of doing something that Nintendo has always been known for, using their console to the best of its abilities rather than following a trend, right?
That's a really great point, and it's not something I think I would have ever come to. I would have never come to that point thinking about the N64 as slightly behind the times, but having very real physical benefits to a flash-based, cartridge-based memory.
Yeah.
And that being indicative of Nintendo saying we'll do more with less, or we'll do more with the thing that, we have a incredibly specific and pronounced vision as a company, as designers. And I'll get into the history of the design with this game a little bit, but it is very in line with, we're going to make the Wii, and yes, it's weaker than the PS3, but I don't care, and I'll, and we'll have an experience that nobody else will have.
Yeah.
And maybe this is from their perspective at, originally as a playing card company, as a toy company, of there needs to be an aspect of physical fun to their games, even up to the Switch, right? Even through the 3DS, through the DS, through their handheld consoles as well. Like it's very indicative of Nintendo's design philosophy throughout.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and the smoothness of play is something I hadn't considered until you said it, because it is remarkably easy to play the game. It's easy to pick it up. You never feel like, even when you're backtracking, you don't feel frustrated by load screens. You just feel maybe frustrated or emboldened by the design of the dungeon itself, which is iconic for its own reason.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's definitely one of those things that they call video editing and filmmaking the invisible art, because it's one of those artistic employments where if you notice it, then you probably are doing a bad job.
Oh, yeah.
You need to actually be, if you're a really good editor, then your viewers are going to get the best, and they're going to be able to say, I don't know why that felt so good, but it felt good. That's your job as an editor. And that seems to be, I feel like, a lot of the mantra of engineers, and about when it comes to working with designers, of making sure that the game feels snappy, feels good, feels technically, but you don't know why. Why does it feel fine to just go back? Why does it feel fine to do X, Y, or Z? And there are design options and design decisions that can do that, and there are technical ones too. John Carmack is a king of this when it came to when creating Doom, making sure that the backtracking was fun by making the game faster, by making loading screens non-existent, by making, that point, the menus were all at 90, walls were at 90 degrees. So that way, all Wolfenstein, right? Wolfenstein, all of the walls and everything were 90 degrees. And that really added to the game being very repetitive. So one of the things that was a huge technical feat for Doom was, okay, how do we make walls that aren't at 90 degrees? how do I make this so that my partner, John Romero, can make more interesting levels and things like that?
That's very cool.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting idea that I would have never thought of, is just in the granularity of the actual design of a level.
Yeah.
Just the sort of, it just looks different on the way back through, and you don't see it on the way through. There was a really interesting piece. I think it must have been in Into the Aether or something like that. I think Brendan Bigley was talking about replaying the original Uncharted games and having this real moment of just kind of like silly, fun joy, walking through a temple and seeing all the obvious places to take cover, all the places you're gonna have to fight through, and it's like all of the stuff is really right front and center. So
And I think that's a good thing. Like, yes, it's a little bit cheesy of like, obviously there's gonna be something here, but it builds anticipation, right? It builds like, oh my god, there's about something super cool is about to happen. And it leads to bringing it back to Ocarina of Time. Bombable walls, right? You can tell whether there's a bombable wall, but or when there's gonna be something that moves because it's not pre-rendered or baked into the background, so you see an object and you're like, okay, at some point I'm gonna be able to move that thing because it's obviously rendered in a way very different from the background. It's the Scooby-Doo effect, right?
Yeah.
The you can tell, okay, that's not
I was
part
just
of
gonna say it.
that's something that's gonna move. And I think that obviously it wasn't born out of a design decision. The designers didn't. I personally think that the designers didn't decide specifically, I want this to pop out and I want this whatever. It probably came out of from a technical limitation of, hey, we're gonna need to not be able to render this exactly the same as the background because the lighting is gonna be different and all these different reasons. So you're gonna have to make do. And designers, I imagine that designers went with it. They were like, hey, how do I use this to my advantage then? Well, okay, then I can use it to hide puzzles or to create anticipation or to make the game a little bit more anticipation. That's just the word, right? I don't know. I could choose a billion synonyms for it, but that's at the end of the day what it is. Anticipation.
It's the expectation of the player, and like the idea of this anticipation, there's a reality in which Ocarina of Time is a video game, and video games are meant to be played. And I think you can kind of draw a line from Ocarina of Time to Elden Ring, and along the way, you'll find a lot of games that don't want to be video games anymore.
Yeah.
They want to be something else, or they're afraid of being too video gamey in spite of themselves, in spite of their place as in their medium of itself. I think of something like Death Stranding, right? Where you have a game that is super high-minded in sense of story, themes, iconography, imagery, everything that Kojima and his team were trying to do in that game, they achieved. But at the end of the day, it was an inventory management and like an open world travel. It was a video game, and it had like video game aspects to it, and it still scratched those itches in the same way that, you know, when we get to Metal Gear Solid 2, I'm sure we'll see that there's very much in the way of video game design principles in it, on top of Kojima's nuance and his genius.
I love you bringing that up, because if you think about what would that version be in a book, it would be like the author saying, or the narrator saying, they entered a room and then just describing the room, and then all of a sudden one sentence out of nowhere saying, there is an incredibly suspicious carpet on the floor that seems like that could have a trap door underneath it, and then just continues talking about something completely different. It's like, oh, it's super obvious what's gonna happen next. Like, it wouldn't work in other mediums. It's a very video gamey.
I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, you could kind of see it in a book or something. Like, sometimes there's like really obvious foreshadowing in a book or even a movie, and like you can really smell it. And part of that anticipation and that joy is like, what are they going to do with it? And then, you know, you go far enough down the rabbit hole with literature, and then you start getting to red herrings, and then you start getting into playing with the expectations of the reader, of your audience. Is the author alive? Are they dead? Yada, yada. And you get that over the course of video game history as well. And it's happening every single day. You know, and a lot of it, I think, comes down to the direction and voice and design principles of a studio or a game maker. I mean, we're sitting here on September 6th, the day after Starfield came out and just dropped to Game Pass today. And I mean, like them or hate them, however you feel about Bethesda, Todd Howard, any of that, you can't knock what him and his team have created over the past 20 or 30 years of design principles, because they have some of the most well-regarded RPGs ever made, and they're extremely video gamey. They are unbelievably a video game, and they're still beloved to this day.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder why you were mentioning how some video games don't want to be video games.
Yeah.
I wonder why, where, I know that I know some of the reasons because they feel like video games are for children and therefore we want to be more mature and everything. But if you were to tell an author, make a book without foreshadowing, they would be kind of like, why? Like, sure, I could do it, but that's just a tool in your toolbox, right? Why wouldn't I use foreshadowing, and why wouldn't you use these design decisions of building anticipation? Because that is, I guess, another word for it, right? Foreshadowing, like you mentioned, where seeing
Yeah.
those shields at those places to take cover is a foreshadowing tool to be used by designers.
And it's a really interesting point you bring up, because when you get into authors and novels that no longer want to be literature or no longer want to be novels in the traditional sense, you
Mm-hmm.
get into some really incredible pieces of metafiction and postmodern literature, which
Mm-hmm.
I spent quite a bit of time in my life with. And you get things like Voss, which is a novel about vasectomies, and an author trying to deal with the implications emotionally, physically, and psychologically of being a 21st century man getting a vasectomy in his relationship. And the book resists being read in a very physical way. It's like awkwardly shaped. It doesn't want to stay open when you open it. The spine's
Huh.
super stiff. Like, it is a physically difficult book to read on almost on an accessibility level. And you start getting, and something probably the most common and most popular example of metafiction and postmodern writing, where literature ceases to deal with or address the fact that it is literature, is or deals with it excessively, is like House of Leaves by
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Lusky, if you've ever heard or read that, where it's a book where there's dozens and dozens of blank pages in it, and there's some pages that have 3 words on it, and it's an absolute just mind fuck from beginning to end. And it's a book that is very resistant to reading. It's a book that has multiple narratives playing out at the same exact time across the book itself, where the front page matters. It's like crazy, and
Mm-hmm.
you start to see that in games today, like what's it, the Stanley Parable.
Yeah, that is one of my huge. That's my like Citizen Kane of filming. I haven't played Stanley Parable, and it seems like I should have played that
I know
so far
it.
ago, so long ago.
I'm with you on that, and that's similar in a similar space, where it's a game that really breaks the rules of what it is to be a game, as opposed to. So I think it lives in two camps, where it's like, I'm a game that is hyper aware that I'm a game, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to play with the aspect of it.
Yeah.
In regards to your partner Lauren had me play Accounting in VR,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's a game that is very interested in being a video game and what that means and how that plays out while being, part of
Mm,
their that studio's brand of humor,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to. And so my example of this, games that want to be something other than a game, and we talked about this last time, is
Mm-hmm.
like The Last of Us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is a game that is so ingrained in being a video game and being played with a controller, but at the same time is doing an incredible job hiding the aspects of it that are necessarily gaming. And again, this is
Yeah.
something we're going to get to later this year as well. And there's other experiences like that, where it's sometimes it's just a game that is very interested in just being a probably a more, I'll call it normal, for lack of a better term, experience, like an Ocarina of Time or even an Elden Ring, right, where everybody knows it's a video game, the designers and the developers know that it's a video game,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still an incredible story, and it's enlightened and brought to life through that fact, as
Yeah.
opposed to in spite of it or against it or in anticipation or understanding of it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of meta stories and bonker stories and all these things, let's talk about how Ocarina of Time doesn't have a
Yeah.
bonker story and a crazy story or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward. I think that the biggest, I guess, spoilers alerts. I think that all
We
our
can do spoilers here.
spoilers. The biggest spoiler for Ocarina of Time is essentially how much gameplay is in it, right?
Right.
You start playing this game, you hear about the three things that you need to collect to open the Temple of Time and all these different things, and you think that that's probably going to be it, right? Like you collect these three things, you get the Master Sword, you fight Ganon, and the story's over.
Yeah.
But that's not even halfway through the game, right?
It's the first quarter.
The first quarter even, and it is what a treat to have a the plot twist of a game is that it has more game. Right? What a treat.
Yeah, it is. It's a good point that it's a game that kind of sets up the expectations of you do the thing that's happened in every other Zelda game and every other Legend of Zelda game where you are collecting this MacGuffin, that MacGuffin, and the next, and it's usually in some form of 3s or 7s or 5s or whatever it happens to be in that game. And there's a clear and obvious villain, and then there's your princess, and it's still interacting with and playing in very many ways, cementing the experience of a Legend of Zelda game. But it's also just leading you on to having that experience of you're not just young Link. You're this is called the Ocarina of Time for a reason. And we're going to show you what that means, and we're going to give you the full control of the ocarina and the ability to play songs and have some freedom of movement. You don't just walk up to a pedestal and click the A button to play the Song of Time or Zelda's Lullaby or, the Minuet of Fire or what have you. It's always, or the Bolero of Fire. It's always play the damn song.
Yeah. And it's so that in of its own, the fracking,
it's incredible.
The notes in of itself, I don't want to regurgitate it because I don't remember everything that was said in the video, but there is a full 15 to 30 minute video on how Koji Kondo came up with the notes that you would need to, because it's like, okay, I only get 5 notes. Which 5 notes am I going to choose that are going to allow you to play 10 songs? It's crazy. And I think that Koji Kondo is somebody who, for better or for worse, is very complex character as a composer, just because of I don't know how much you know about how much sampling he used for his a lot of the songs that you hear in Ocarina of Time. This might be something that might be removing the veil from your head. Then it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of songs in Ocarina of Time and original Mario as well that are very obvious from a library sampling that he just owned. He was just he was more of a DJ almost than a composer. And you hear some of these songs, the original version versus the Ocarina of Time version, and you go, that feels uncomfortably close. That feels a little bit too close for comfort. It doesn't feel like it was inspired. It kind of entering that world of plagiarism, and it's kind of like, this hurts a little bit to know that this song that is so so iconic is sample, and it's not plagiarism in the sense of legal. I don't think he did anything illegal. DJs can sample and remix and reuse, but it does. So I'm not saying that he plagiarized in the legal sense, but it is a little bit. All of our DJ listeners. I'm not trying to piss off all my DJ. That's most of the music I listen to. Please, remixes. But it is sometimes, and maybe this just speaks more towards me. Maybe this becomes just a me that I need to talk with my therapist of why do I feel like this is disappointing that he didn't create this from scratch, and maybe that just speaks more to me rather than the artistic process. So.
I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
You could check it out sometime on YouTube.
I will.
And you'll notice that some of these are okay, this is a little bit a little bit too close for comfort, in my opinion. But having said that, and the reason I said this, because I would imagine that there are some listeners that knew about it and would be remiss if we said, oh, Kanji Kondo is a master composer without mentioning that he still is pretty much a master composer. Like having to pick
100%.
those five notes in of itself, like that's even crazy. That's like game design on top of composing, right? Like
Right.
you ask John Williams, hey, can you compose this Star Wars song? Okay, yeah, awesome. Okay, now could you make it also so that way for our audience can like whistle specific notes and therefore something different happens, and those notes can't just be random. They need to listen good, hear good. They need to sound really good.
Yeah, just can you do all of Star Wars with 5 notes? That would be great. Yeah, I just really need everyone to be able to whistle it on their way out of the theater. So you're gonna need to simplify it, I think, a little bit, because I can't whistle Duel of Fates, you know? Maybe I can. I don't know.
Skill issue.
Yeah, it's a skill issue. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward to have to say that we need to talk about the music in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
Because that's so much of the experience of this game. Let's get into, I want to do a little development history.
Sure.
And I want to talk about our histories with Legend of Zelda and Ocarina of Time. I think we got off to a really great start. So why don't we start with why don't you tell me how you came across Zelda? What was your experience with Zelda? What's that like?
My experience of Zelda in general or Ocarina of Time specifically?
Both.
Both. I believe that my first relationship with Legend of Zelda was I never owned an N64 growing up. So my first experience with Legend of Zelda were the Oracle of Ages game, where I played.
Great games.
It's great. Love that game to death. I played it.
God, Capcom Zelda, let's go.
Let's go. Which has its own. I don't want to get sidetracked, but there were supposed to be 3. They went to 2. Anyways, Oracle of Ages, really enjoyed it, and after that I always had murmurs of like this game, Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda, and all these different things and all these different games, and after a while, my friend got an N64, and I played a lot of Zelda when I was over at his place, but it was not my own save account. It was essentially, I could play off of his game, and I just would not save, so that way it would go back to where he was, and he could play it. So I played.
Oh my god, that's so wild! What a ridiculous way to play Ocarina of Time.
So I played
it's like you got to have a Blockbuster experience without ever going to Blockbuster.
Yes, pretty much. So I was essentially I played the first temple through to completion. I played the second temple, the Death Mountain. I don't believe I played Jabu Jabu this first time because he just finished Jabu Jabu before I was able to come back. And so it was like a bunch of this like pick and choose your adventures, so to speak. And it was the best way that I could describe it, it was like me as a kid watching a serialized cartoon where you don't always get to see every episode because things happen. Your parents took you out to the park that day, or you had a birthday party and you weren't able to see that episode or anything like that. So you just missed some episodes, right? So that's how I treated Ocarina of Time.
Your Ocarina of Time experience was everyone's Dragon Ball Z Toonami experience, where somehow Goku's only been running on the Serpent's Path for 2 years straight, and I've never seen another episode.
That is pretty much how my first Ocarina of Time experience went.
Oh man! So how did you? So that's really cool. That's actually that's a crazy. That's got to be crazy to come to it now.
Yes. So that's not my only time. I have finished it quite a few times since.
Oh, okay, cool.
That. Yeah. This was I did that, and then sometime in my preteens, my uncle I was staying with him over a weekend and I played it, and then I was able to finish it all the way through, like maybe 8 years after. So it came out in 98. I was 7 at the turn of the millennia, so probably around 5 to 6 years after it had come out, I was able to play it from beginning to end. Then I played it again on the 3DS. That's probably the best. If it was on a TV, I would definitely say it's the best way to play it. But the fact that it's on a 3DS makes it a little bit difficult. And then this time I played it again. So in total, I believe I have 2 completion. I have only beaten it 3 times, excluding the first time when there was the Dragon Ball Z mode.
Filler arcs.
I was watching my girlfriend play it for the first time, so I was able to experience the game through her eyes as well. That was in college, even though I didn't actually play. I played a little bit in some places where she wasn't able to.
I don't think I don't think you should understate that experience. It's a lot different doing that than like watching a let's play, which is still a valid experience, but not the whole thing. But still, that's awesome. I love that you came to the series at first on Oracle of Ages.
What a game to start at!
Incredible games, so worth revisiting it or visiting for the first time if you haven't had the opportunity. It's so wild to think it. I love thinking about the idea that Capcom got the Zelda license and they did something so innovative by giving you a reason to play both of the games.
Yeah, which I never got to do, unfortunately.
I've never done it either. I was an Oracle of Seasons guy myself.
Really?
Yeah.
My goodness, these are amazing hot takes. My reason for playing Ocarina of Ages was only 2 reasons as a little kid. Oracle of Ages. Ocarina of Ages. Oracle of Ages.
Next game.
Only 2 reasons. A, it's blue, and blue was my favorite color. And
that's all it takes.
And B, when I was reading, I was like, well, if I had the power to control ages or seasons, I think I would rather control ages than seasons. So that was literally my only reason.
Strictly the correct choice.
Is it? I've never played Seasons, so I have no idea if it was.
Seasons was sweet. Seasons was really sweet. I think one was supposed to be more difficult than the other. I think Ages was supposed to be harder.
From what I've heard, Ages is more puzzle oriented and Seasons is more combat oriented.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that would explain why I resonated so much with Seasons than over Ages, because I'm not as much a puzzle guy. We talked about this over the weekend, actually, with my lack of witness in my life.
How dare you?
I know. I've been chagrined many a time before.
Soon coming to you, twitch.tv, WobyCon, a let's play with me and me just breathing down Jason's neck.
That'll be good. Maybe we should probably make like a use your items Twitch that we can share. That would be way more fun. And it would make a lot more sense than my crazy Twitch handle. But anyway, so your experience, so you had a very interesting history with this game and coming to it, and you've played it a few times. That's awesome.
Yeah.
My experience with Zelda at large was watching some kids play A Link to the Past on Game Boy Color in summer camp. And then I think I was not typically a Zelda gamer. I would say I didn't really play any of them on the SNES or the NES. My first solo experience with Legend of Zelda, I'm gonna say, was probably Twilight Princess.
Whoa. Okay.
So I played Twilight Princess to completion. I actually loved it. I think Twilight Princess is chagrined for all the wrong reasons. I think it's great.
Is that gonna be one of our games? Because I similar to Metal Gear Solid 2, as a young lad, I did not particularly enjoy it, and I'm curious to see if I gave it more flack than it deserved.
Yeah, it was maligned, and I don't think it was maligned for the wrong reasons at the time. I do think that it caught some flack for being on the Wii,
Okay.
and despite it also being a GameCube title, which is another interesting. It's another like Breath of the Wild thing.
Yeah.
Right? But regardless, I think that was my first full Zelda experience. I want to say that was it because I didn't play really. I didn't play Oracle of Seasons until I was in college, and I know I played Twilight Princess on the Wii when it came out, and that came out when I was in high school. So I think the timeline works out that would be correct. I never played Ocarina of Time, much like our other episodes. I spent a lot of time reading about it in my Nintendo Power subscription.
So wait, was this your first time?
This is my first time completing Ocarina
wow,
of
I didn't
Time.
know that.
I played it. I played Ocarina of Time once before during college. I remember particularly being extremely hungover after a rager with some friends in Delaware, and we were at like my buddy's house, and he had an N64 and an Xbox and a PS4. It was like it was just like a guy's house, and they had like every console possible set up.
A true bachelor pad.
A true bachelor pad. And my friends were playing Dead Space, and I was playing Ocarina of Time. And I'm sure I was playing like the Ocarina of Time drinking game at the time.
Oh my god.
Which was a terrible idea. I won't repeat it here for the sake of our listeners' livers, but bad idea. And I never finished it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was cool. I do remember being like shocked when I got to Hyrule Field, which I think is the appropriate response.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really do anything with Zelda again until I picked up Oracle of Seasons, and I loved it. And then in later on in college, I played through, I think it must have been grad school actually, I played through all of Majora's Mask. And I am a much more fervent Majora's Mask fan. I love Majora's Mask.
I see a man of culture as well.
It's just it's so weird and offbeat, and it feels a little bit more adult, which I appreciate, but it's so dark, and it has like some Tim Burton to it, but it's not saccharine in its treatment like that. I love Majora's Mask to death. I find it so compelling for so many reasons, especially just having a Zelda game that doesn't really end perfectly is a really interesting take on the series as a whole. But so I came to Ocarina this year after many years of playing Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Twilight Princess. I tried Wind Waker. I did not like Wind Waker.
Interesting. I have not finished Wind Waker.
Not a popular opinion, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It's one of those games where I think that people that love it really love it.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many. It was fine, or yeah, it was good. Fans, it's usually either they're ride or die. Wind Waker fans.
There's really it's of any major series like this. I feel like that's the case. There's often not a middle fan. Maybe in a larger series that's more prolifically produced, like Pokemon.
Interesting.
You can have a middling opinion, and that's pretty acceptable. But even so, I loved Black and White, and I thought Black and White 2 was exceptional. And I've been crucified on internet forums for loving Black and White 2.
That is very interesting. You need to find the competitive scene, because most competitive players say that Black and White 2 was the last competitive Pokemon game out there. So I never got to play it. Pokemon for me is very simple. Are the starters cool? If not, then I won't play it. And I just did not like the starters from that generation, so I was like, I'm out.
Yeah, it's the right way to do it at this point. But anyway, I don't want to digress too far.
Yeah, my bad.
my experience with Zelda has been a little bit fraught since then. I didn't finish Breath of the Wild. I haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom because my Switch died. I'm not a monster.
I haven't finished it either. And I am a monster.
Good. We're in good company then. But it's just it's often not been my series because I'm not the craziest about puzzle solving, which I think is a lot of the joy that's derived from the series is
Interesting.
combat, exploration, adventure, puzzle solving, kind of that sort of melange of it all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say I had a little bit more of a removed history with the game. I didn't grow up with it, so I didn't really have like a strong nostalgia to it. So when talking to some of my friends who suggested it, and it comes down to there's this really intense nostalgia with it to the point where my friend Mike was explaining to me how he was so terrified of the re-deads when he played it. Like his cousin had to explain to his parents why he couldn't eat dinner because he was so distressed by
The
like
zombie
being
hug
unable
you.
to leave. Yeah, to being unable to leave the Temple of Time, which is a quintessential childhood experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
it's up there with like the Never-Ending Story
Yeah.
or what's the Tim Burton, the Nightmare
Remember
Before
for Christmas.
Christmas,
Yep.
where it's just these quintessential experiences of both fear and joy and terror kind of all wrapped
Jumanji.
into one. Jumanji,
Yeah.
yeah. I
I
mean,
really think
we're
that that's
90s kids, I
something.
guess.
Yeah, they're 90s because that's something that has been. It's coming back a little bit. There has been a few recent shows like Gravity Falls where
Yes.
they are bringing back some because there was a kind of like a saccharine age epoch, so to speak, in the 2000s where everything was hyper clean. They were like, we cannot have anything scary for any children. Everything needs to be
Yeah.
super cutesy, super all these things, very Nick Jr. and everything like that. But I think there is something too important growing up about being scared or as a kid wanting to be scared or wanting to overcome fear and feeling having that feeling
Are you a
be
horror
there.
movie guy?
No, I really am not. Well, I'm for the most part no. I would
Yeah.
say I'm definitely not a gore horror movie like Saw and stuff like that. I don't see
Sure.
the
That's a
appeal.
particular time.
Yeah, for as from a other's perspective, from a more psychological horror, those I'm more into, but more from a is the drama good, so to speak. Like I'm
Right.
not a like I wouldn't watch just like Scream or Friday the 13th or
You seem like a
Halloween.
Shutter Island kind of guy.
I haven't seen it, but yes, from what I've heard, something more like that, where
Okay.
we're a little bit more subdued. And I'm not, I wouldn't say that I'm that type of guy either. Like, I'm not a fan.
Okay,
It's just
fair.
that I like good movies, and some good movies
Yeah.
happen to be horror movies,
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
deal.
Fair enough.
So
Yeah, I
what? Let me sit down, lay down in bed. What was you gonna tell me about my therapy session here? What were you gonna psychoanalyze
no.
about
No, no,
me
no, no,
liking
not at
horror
all.
movies or not?
I was just curious if you had a relationship with horror movies or not, coming from that perspective of of
Well,
seeing the value in courage, right? That's
I
kind of
guess. Well, now that I'm thinking about it, and now that I'm going back, I grew up loving Nightmare Before Christmas. And one of
okay.
the reasons why I loved it so much was because my parents didn't want me to watch it because they were scared that I was gonna be scared. Like
Huh.
I was very young. I was just essentially I was at that point I got scared of Jumanji. I mentioned Jumanji. I got scared of Jumanji, the plant scene that grabs his leg and starts like pulling
It's
him
actually a
towards
really scary
like
scene for a kid, I
like
think.
that freaked me the heck out and so when I wanted to watch Nightmare Before Christmas, my parents were very much like, I don't think this is a good idea. This ain't it, chief.
Yeah.
So being able so loving just loving to death this movie when I finally did get to see it, and my parents were like, "Oh, okay, he's enjoying it and he likes it," and I'm like, "Yo, this movie is sick," and I'm watching it like every year and so to speak. So there is some level of creepiness that I like. I guess I like the spooky aesthetic, not necessarily the horror getting
Okay.
scared type of thing.
What'd you think of the spooky aesthetic, if at all, in Ocarina of Time? Because it's there, right?
It
It's
is there.
undeniable.
Undeniable. I am one we can get later on into the music and everything, but just to really quickly,
talk about spookiness.
spookiness, one of my favorite, the song that I feel like in Ocarina of Time goes under the radar the most is the forest temple song. Where then? And that is the creepy and unsettlingness of it. Like, I know that when everybody talks of Ocarina of Time, the first thing that they go to is the Shadow Temple, right? This is the quintessential spooky temple, right?
Guess.
But
Yeah.
for me, that music and that like being in this place that is in between spirit realm and physical, and the hallway that twists so that way now everything is upside down and something
crazy.
is everything is unsettling, is just Forest Temple, and specifically the music to me personally is a very underrated song in Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
And so for me personally, I think that there is a lot in Ocarina of Time that I would say the spooky aesthetics speak to me from a feeling and overworld tone type of deal. I will say I'm not as interested in the Shadow Temple's spookiness. Just from my perspective, it seems very straightforward, I guess.
Right.
It's very creepy. Don't get me wrong. That monster,
absolutely.
like the little hands and big mouth, it's very
Right.
creepy and everything like that. But it really does feel like they were just thinking, okay, what's something creepy? Blood. Okay, darkness. Okay, big mouth, no eyes. Like, it seems like it was very by the books creepy, and like, scythes and knives and all these different things. Versus there's a lot of other places in Ocarina of Time that are much more unsettling, quiet, spooky, and those are the ones where I'm like for example, the Redeads in the Hyrule Square. I would say the Redeads on Hyrule Square is not the scariest part of Hyrule Square. The fact that it's so empty and it's so
unsettling.
quiet after you've been there so many times before, where there's people dancing and music and all these different things. That to me is the more spooky part of Ocarina of Time that they do really well.
Yeah, I mean that it's there's not a game I think that does juxtaposition of spaces like that better.
Yeah.
Of having this huge change between childhood and adulthood, which is so much the DNA of the game, is spreading this experience out of growing up from childhood and then seeing the same places that you grew up in quite literally change in 7 years. And this experience that so many of us, maybe everybody, has had of watching their childhood change, their childhood sort of rose-colored lenses fall off, and like you said it beautifully. It's not just that it's full of re-dead, it's that it's empty and it's dark and the sky is dreary, and this place that was full of love and life and excitement and this experience of, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. I can't believe I'm allowed to explore this I can go into all of these shops, and then you get there and there's nothing left and the whole world's collapsed in your while you were gone in your coma or whatever you want to call it. And it's quintessential to the experience of what Ocarina's doing. I think of a lot of Miyamoto's guidance as far as taking these things that he's so apt at doing, of capturing this joy and wonderment that comes with childhood, but then extrapolating it or zooming in on it, right? He does these things both very well, whether you look at something like Pikmin being like this really hyper-focused example of taking an experience and making it full of wonderment and sort of childhood joy, or this extrapolation of it as child Link to adult Link.
Yeah.
And seeing that, it's it's a really compelling image, and it's a really compelling experience that not a lot of other games offer in the same spaces, where you kind of get to explore the same space that you've already explored, this place that you've learned to understand. It's one of the magic tricks, I think, of Ocarina of Time, right? Where
Yeah.
you get to know this space. You know Ocarina, or I'm sorry, Hyrule City, Hyrule Field. You know the Zora area, the Goron, Death Mountain, Kakariko Village, all of these areas, the forest, the Lost Woods. Like, you get to know them so well in the first quarter of the game, and then you finish the quest that Princess Zelda gave you, and you're left with this really dark experience of, I have to go back through the things that I knew and I thought I understood, and nothing's the way I left it.
Yeah.
And it's this really stark moment of, growing up and maturing maybe faster than you're ready for.
Yeah, definitely. That is a big thing, and not just growing up faster than you were meant to grow in all these different things, but also regret, right?
Yeah.
Like this is something that I didn't notice the first like couple times I played. But it's kind of your fault. Well, not your necessarily only your fault, but it's yours and Zelda's accidental fault for letting Ganondorf into the Temple of Time,
Letting
right?
him win.
Like, if you hadn't collected all three pieces, then you wouldn't have, and brought them to the Temple of Time, he wouldn't have gotten the three pieces. He wouldn't have been able to, the Temple of Time would have opened, and he wouldn't have had access to the spirit realm, to the sacred realm, right?
Yeah.
So kind of this whole like, oh my goodness, this is my fault. This is something that I need to do. I've grown so fast. Like, that ending is so good. I feel like it's such a good ending in that
It's really meaningful.
she's sending you back to your time to like you need to go back, dude. You need to like go like learn like grow up in your own time. What a nice thought and nice story.
Yeah, you lived through the worst of it, and now you get to go back and experience and get to live your childhood that you lost. It's this reclaiming of lost innocence. And then you just a few years later, you get Majora's Mask.
Yes, I was gonna say, like, that didn't last long, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I love Majora's Mask so much, and I think it does such a wonderful job of dealing with this sense of lost innocence and this sense of just sort of forsakenment that the series is, I think, very, very interested in, because you're constantly replaying the role as the hero of time, right? Constantly. In every game, it's you and Zelda and this cast of characters that repeat, and that's something that's so beautiful and wonderful and very mythological about the series, despite their forced timeline that I refuse to believe. But
Ocarina of Time is the one that messed everything up, man. 3 timelines, my guy. 3 timelines.
Unnecessary. It didn't need to be unified. They didn't need to say anything. They should have just let good art lie, but not allowed. I think that the way that the series attempts to deal with this sense of childhood loss and abandonment, and it just captures these really salient experiences of, I think, maybe universal experiences of childhood, of feeling, isolated, alienated, othered, and
bullied at the beginning.
Bullied.
You're bullied.
Yeah, you're othered, you're bullied, you don't belong, you're not an elf, you shouldn't be in the forest, you don't have a fairy. I mean, so much of it is this experience, this oftentimes quintessential, unfortunately, experience of childhood, where it's not all sunny and bright skies, and I think probably relates very closely to a lot of people who play games and grew up playing games, and speaks to that real darkness that can sort of cloud, I mean, an otherwise beautiful childhood. It doesn't have to be all downs and downsome stuff, but it is a game that and you know, we're not breaking new ground, right, by saying any of this, but it's a game that really emphasizes the thematic elements of the story in its gameplay and its design. And that's something that is evidence of, I think, masterwork and mastercraft, because it's easy to write a story. It's not, but it's easy to do any one of these things once, but then to hit all of it and get all of it to line up with the experience of playing the songs and how the songs work, and the experience of gaining these new items and these new power-ups and getting to feel more and more powerful as the game continues.
Yeah.
But then continually presented with additional challenges that will stress the ways that you've learned to play the game, and put you in these periods, in these positions of, I was once powerful, I did understand how things worked, and now, much like learning and growing and becoming an adult and losing your innocence, I'm now put in a situation where I have tools, but I don't have all of the tools. And now I have to navigate a new space, a lost space, something that is not something that I'm previously familiar with.
Yeah, agreed. So, having said all this, I think something interesting that we could talk about is, if you could give a negative or a criticism, what would your criticisms be?
I don't want to neg the game, but I had some problems with level and dungeon design.
Okay.
And I played on the 3DS version, which I think is the quintessential version. If you have an XL, it's a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
Or you have small hands, I guess. I found gameplay as Child Link to be infinitely more enjoyable than Adult Link. I didn't like Adult Link's items. I did like having Epona. I did like riding around Hyrule Field on the horse, but it's so minimal that it almost doesn't matter. And if you miss it, I don't think you're missing a lot.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't unlock her this time.
I don't blame you. It's a whole extra thing.
I couldn't remember how to do it. I mean, remind me how to do it, because I got to as an adult, I went over there, I paid the rupees, I played the ocarina for opponents to get near me.
Yeah.
I rode her, I went over the jumps, I locked on to Luigi while on the horse and talked to him. Yeah, it's Luigi and Mario. Come on.
Yeah,
this is obviously. And I just could not get him to challenge me to a horse race, and I don't remember how to get him to challenge me to a horse race.
That's it. You're supposed to, you pay the rupees, you walk into the pen, you play Epona's song, you ride her around the pen, you jump over everything, you walk up, you lock onto him, you talk to him, and he says, "You're pretty good at riding that. You want to race for some money?" And then you have to beat him 2 or 3 times, I think.
I have no idea what happened then. I couldn't get it to happen. I don't know.
Weird.
Maybe it was bugged. I don't know. But I just assumed, oh, maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe it needs to wait until I finished a few temples or something.
You can get it as soon as you get into the field as Adult Link, so I don't know what happened. I'm sorry you didn't get Epona, but I mean, she's great, so. and it's a great experience. But my biggest issue, and maybe we should just talk about the dungeons,
sure,
and how they worked. But I found the childhood dungeons to be way more fun, and I found that the themes of them, it was just there was something that was so wonderful and exciting and just full of like this real joyful experience of, I'm a little kid and now I'm in the stomach of the whale. You know, I'm Jonah in the whale. I'm in the Great Deku Tree. I'm having all of these moments. I'm in Dodongo's Cavern. I love Dodongo's Cavern.
Yeah.
I love the experience of like fighting this stupid derpy kind of monster and throwing. My friend Brian actually brought this up. It felt so innovative at the time that you throw bombs into this thing's mouth to kill it, and like it was just really fun, and it really encapsulated the experience of, you know, what it would feel like to be a child in a dungeon and doing these things.
Now that you mention it, yeah, I can agree with that. I think that the Child Link levels are much more resonant to me now thinking about it, because I'm thinking, okay, Fire Temple. Well, Fire Temple is just, it's kind of like
It's okay.
Dodongo's Cavern. It's just okay. The only the Water Temple, everybody has talked about how bad the Water Temple is.
The Water Temple I think is much better in the 3DS version.
It definitely is. It definitely
And I
is.
think if you wanted to say it was your favorite temple and you played the 3DS version, I think you'd be well within your rights
Sure.
to do so. I think it's beautifully designed. It's the only level that's really deeply vertical.
Yeah.
And really plays with that verticality in a way that's sort of prescient of Breath of the Wild, I think.
I think that the problem with the Water Temple in of itself is that it is preceded by probably one of the most boring areas in the game, the Ice Temple.
Oh my god. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Not the temple, ice caverns.
Ice cavern. I'm like, what am I doing? What I'm like, this I don't remember this being in the and I'm like, oh my god.
It is such a nothing burger, especially since you in the ice cavern and the 3DS they fixed this, but in the N64 version, every time you pick up the fire, it does the this is cold fire to the touch. You can equip it into every single, and you need to burn so much red ice in that level, and it was just mind-boggling how much time
a lot of
is
that
wasted in N64. And hey, I'm gonna hit you with some deets that I don't know if you knew. You don't need the metal boots or the water tunic to beat the Water Temple.
You don't need. How do you not need the metal boots?
You don't. You really don't.
There's no way. How do you get to the bottom to reset the water level?
So, did you get the scale?
Yeah, where it lets you dive deeper.
If you got the scale, the 10-second scale or 8-second scale,
Whatever,
it's just enough time to go underwater and be able to reach all the areas. And you can also do it without the water tunic. You just have just enough time. You start losing health, but you do have enough wiggle room to finish the temple without it. And I will admit to you, the first time I did the Water Temple, I did have the boots, but I did not have the water tunic because I didn't know that I was supposed to get the water tunic. So
I didn't have the water tunic when I did it this playthrough either. I had the boots, but I did not. It was one of those things where I'm like, why am I not getting, like, they gave me the fire tunic, the red tunic. Why wouldn't they give me the blue one? And then I ended up looking it up when I got into the dungeon. I didn't feel like I needed it, but I was like, where the fuck is this thing? And then and then they're like, oh, you had to release King Zor. I'm like, I'm not going back in that ice cavern. You're nuts. I then realized that you could buy the ice, the fire from, but I still didn't do it. I was like, I also didn't get fire arrows this playthrough.
Really? Oh my.
I remembered after the fact that you have to shoot the rising sun in Lake Hyrule, and I was like playing through it, and then a couple times I used a walkthrough when I was just trying to figure something out, or I couldn't figure something out, and they're like, yeah, just shoot it with a fire. I'm like, what fire arrow? And I'm like, oh my god, that's right, I never got them. And it's only really problematic in Ganon's castle at the very end of the game.
Yeah.
When you don't realize that you can, I believe it's in the shadow area of the castle that you have to like super hook shot over to the lake. And then you have to use the hover boots, which I used aggressively.
Oh yeah, the J's, the Air Jordans.
Yeah, the Air Jordans, yeah. I mean, the items are great, the design is great, and the way that you use them after the fact, I think Ganon's castle is maybe my favorite place in the game.
It's like an appetizer. It's so nice. So
yeah, everything's the right amount. It's like the right amount. Like, I got very frustrated in the forest dungeon. I found that I honestly wanted to stop playing while I was in the forest dungeon. I was so frustrated.
I love the forest dungeon. I agree though. I did get lost. Yep, I did get lost a couple times, so I do agree. It's such a bop. This music though. I was like,
The music's great.
It's
Yeah,
like
I love the music. It was a great place. I mean, it's a good thing I like the music because I spent a lot of time in there. It was just like I found the backtracking to be like kind of very frustrating. The fire temple was cool. I wasn't like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I did like the experience of getting the mallet. I wish it got used a little bit more.
Yeah.
And figuring out like that firewall puzzle with the rolling rocks was actually very cool. I felt like very smart when I figured that out. So they did a good job with that for sure. There was a lot of, I kept screwing up a jump or a roll or something, and I kept having to push that stupid block to make the elevator, and I'm like, oh my God, guys, can you just please leave it? Can you just leave it? Like, why do I have to keep doing this? And jumping on that and doing that whole segment was a little frustrating. I actually had a very similar experience in the Water Temple because and I would say that the Water Temple was one of my favorites if it wasn't for the fact that I didn't realize that I missed a time block after you fight Shadow Link. You're supposed to play a time. The next thing you do after that is you just play the Zelda's Lullaby, or the Song of Time. You get rid of the time block. You just fall down through the cavern. You grab the last key you need, and then you do one more area, and then you're at the boss. My stupid ass, Fran. My stupid ass.
You feel so badass.
I missed that time block. I walked out the fucking front door that I walked in, and I reset that water level. I went through that temple maybe 6 to 10 more times, not being able to figure out where this last area I had to go to was, until eventually I looked it up, and I was like, and they were like, just use the last key. You should have it. If not, go back through the walkthrough. I'm like, I'm going to lose my mind. I can't find this. I'm like, is my game bugged? I was like, I was like Googling, like, can you soft lock the game in the Water Temple? And they're like, you're literally the millionth person to ask this. Stop asking it. You can't do it. It's not possible. And then I realized I forgot to play the Song of Time. So that one's probably more on me than anything.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Fire Temple and the Water Temple?
Fire Temple, it's pretty. I played the 64 one, so I did get the Muslim chanting, which, OG music. It's like, oh, that's neat. It's very generic, I guess. I don't think anything about it. I will say about the Water Temple and just about this playthrough in general. You were mentioning the fire arrows. How much did you use magic?
Really not much at all.
So I learned magic is OP. This playthrough. This is my.
What do you use it on? Din's fire?
Din's fire. Just enemies in the room. Din's fire. They're all dead. Keep moving. Freaking Dark Link. Din's fire. Din's fire. Din's fire.
Are you serious?
Din's fire.
I'm like sitting
Din's
here
fire.
like it's Elden Ring. I'm like rolling to the left. I'm like trying to remember everything I learned in.
I didn't know
Bloodborne.
you could just. So I did Din's
man.
fire over and over again, and after that, it's just one hit and he's dead.
That's kind of awesome.
I did not know as a kid. I was very much I want to press X, smash X, and deal damage with my sword. I want to swing my sword. This time I was like, even if there was an obvious take out your stick and put this stick on fire to turn this other thing on, light on, there's like, nah, this fire. Just light it up. It's like, cool, let's go.
Yeah. It is kind of OP when you think about it.
And once you get the MP boost, which in my first few playthroughs, I was like, this is useless. I never use magic. Fairy, yeah, right? I never use magic. This is useless. This time I was like, yo,
you broken.
You thought I was just with the axe bad guys, the ones with the big giant armor. Yeah. Din's fire.
That's so wild because I was thinking like, oh, I actually had a moment of thought where I was in the shadow puzzle of Ganon's castle, and I long shot over to the like, and I'm like, I'm just gonna Din's fire this thing. Doesn't work. They're immune to Din's fire, and this friggin' thing eats me, and then destroys my shield. Yep. And I had the red tunic on. Destroys my red tunic before I did the red zone, so I had to teleport out, go back to the Death
Big
Mountain.
oof.
I had to go buy another fire tunic. I'm like, wow, this is you really did me like this, huh? But it's oh my god. I mean, it's an incredible game because it offers those experiences, but at the same time, it's like, damn, man. It's like there's almost a little too much there. Like the
Yeah.
like stealing your because it's like, why would I ever need to buy another shield? Here's why.
Here's why. I wish it was, if you kill them fast enough, it'll drop it.
Yeah.
But
I
wish
did kill it fast enough, and it did drop, and then it died right on the edge of the platform, and the tunic fell, but the shield didn't. It was pretty painful. It was like a moment where I'm like, when did I save last? It was not close enough. Anyway, I'm sorry.
No. That's that. That was it. That was just the experience of Din's fire and the water temple. Really, just OP. Yeah, I think that for yeah, just that was unfortunate. I would have said, yeah, it would be better to just drop the items, but it did, and you just
it was bad luck.
Oof. So yeah, so oh, go ahead.
What I was gonna say, what's after that? After the water temple and stuff.
Water temple. So it's I believe it's forest, fire, water, shadow. I think shadow and spirit temple. You can do it.
Valley though.
You can do them in whatever order. You can choose.
Oh, okay.
I think that those two are interchangeable in the order.
Okay.
Which is pretty neat. I enjoy, especially when you were mentioning, the child temples are better. I do enjoy that the spirit temple and the shadow temple both ask of you to go back as young Link to solve something, to move forward. I really enjoy. I guess we get 3 young Link, 3 adult Link, and then 2 you need to do both. You gotta go between the 2. And I really do enjoy that. Seems like it's a bit annoying that the only way to turn back into a kid is the Temple of Time, so you have to go all the way over there. But other than that, I do enjoy the fact that I can be cool.
I wish they did it more. It was great because to me, I felt like all the temples were a little long for my taste, but the Shadow and the Light Temple were great because you got to be Child Link and Adult Link, and you got such a beautiful, like delicious bite-sized portion of each dungeon, and it was nuanced because you had different items. You got to use these items that you hadn't used in forever. I'm like, oh my god, I love the boomerang to death, and I was
why does the boomerang not work as an adult? That makes no sense.
I know. I mean, it kills me. It was my favorite weapon in Twilight Princess as well. The Gale Boomerang just whips ass. But I was just so in love with this going back and forth. Again, I agree. I wish it was easier than having to play the Minuet of Time or the Minuet of Light or whatever, and have to go.
Minuet is water.
Minuet of the Forest.
Minuet of water, I thought it was.
I don't know.
Oh god. I guess we're not fans. Bolero of Fire. Serenade of Water. So it's not Minuet.
Serenade of Water. I thought it was the Minuet of the Forest.
Yeah, I think it's Minuet of Forest.
I don't remember what something of light. Yeah, we're not going to win that. We're not going to be on a trivia team together then.
Damn. Well, now I gotta find out. You talk while I find out.
Okay, and I think Majora's Mask actually did a really great job of fixing that, where you could interact with the world in these different ways by putting on a mask and changing your character and introducing individualistic, nuanced gameplay to a game that already existed. And it's all the same resources. It's in many ways the same game and a totally different game.
Yeah, and it really does build to good game design. There's a lot of games where there is this idea of the rule of 3 being you show mechanic A in a vacuum, you show mechanic B in a vacuum, and then you show mechanic A and B together in a new and exciting way. And a good game that does this is Mega Man. Kind of going back where there is this mechanic of you meet this new villain and you're like, oh, this is the difficult villain, but it's in a vacuum. That's fine. Then you meet this other like falling grounds. This level where when you walk on the ground starts falling underneath you.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I get the mechanic. And then you meet right after that. It's both of them at the same time. This new enemy you just learned, this falling ground that the enemy kind of like jumps over you, so you kind of need to like dodge it, but you can't really dodge back to where you were because the thing is gonna fall. So it's this idea of vacuum together, vacuum together. Or if you want to go a little bit more complex, you can do vacuum, those two together, then a vacuum, then together, like the other combinations of stuff.
That's like it feels like the glass shattering moment where I'm like, this is like every video game
Yes,
ever.
there's a lot of video games that you'll notice that pattern of we do this, both in a vacuum, and then later on we mesh them together.
It's like I guess I mean yeah, I just want to point out like they did that in Metroid and Mario and Luigi's Mansion and yeah, wow. That's actually very true and extremely cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that leads me to, I guess, a question that I really wanted to ask you is, what do you find either inspirational or not from Ocarina of Time as a developer, as somebody who actively makes video games? What is something that you see in it? I mean, I know that I don't know if you've done a lot of like adventure or open world games like this in the past. I know your last game you weren't really in this space, but I mean, it's everyone says it's the most influential thing ever, and we can point to a million places from it. But as a designer and as a developer yourself, what do you look at as the legacy of Ocarina of Time?
I think that one of the biggest legacies of Ocarina of Time is design through insinuation, where there are a lot of times in the game where you just end up in a place where how the camera is set in such a way where the POI is just in the distance. And that is, POIs are so important in these open world games, right? When you
point
leave
of interest.
point of interest. Sorry, point of interest. When you leave the Lost Woods for the first time, the camera goes like that. You can see Hyrule Temple in the distance.
Barely.
You just barely, and you're like, oh my god, and you go there. When you leave the temple, the Hyrule Castle, you see Mount Doom in the distance. And you're like, whoa, what is that? And you go towards it. There's a lot of little things like that in Ocarina of Time where it would have been very easy. And honestly, they kind of did a disservice to themselves a little bit with the owl character of sometimes telling you a little bit too much, like how holding your hand a little bit too much, like that seems to me, that owl character seems to me an afterthought. Producer was like, oh, kids are not gonna understand what to do, while the designers are like, come on, like there's a super awesome thing in the distance, they're obviously gonna go to the super awesome thing in the distance.
Producer insert.
Yeah, producer. It really does feel like that. And it's not just in exploration, but it's also in combat and in like the enemy with the eye with the laser, that if you just run around it, it'll like start spinning around and it like dies. And
what?
Or wait, no, that's, oh god, I'm mixing Mario. That's a Mario enemy. Oops.
Okay, I was like, wait, you can do what to Beamos?
No.
I was shocked. I was like, I've just been throwing bombs.
Yeah, you need to throw bombs. Or I forgot what other way you could do it. There's another way to kill
Shoot
them.
it in the eye.
Yeah. So stuff like that, bongo with the eyes, like it's things that we take for granted and are very obvious right now of like, oh yeah, shoot it at the weak point, the big glowy part or anything like that. But really that something had to do it first, right? And to bring it back before we're hitting here our last 14 minutes or so, going back to how your friends were saying, oh, it's so nostalgia, it's the first game of its type that I played. Well, really, it was the first game of its type that everyone played, because there wasn't another game of its type, right? Like it's not gonna be it's definitely not gonna be an experience for people who are older, who are younger, who might experience first Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring or stuff like that before Ocarina of Time. But for people from our age, it's not just a nostalgia of Ocarina of Time. It's a nostalgia of discovering a game genre that didn't exist and
Yeah,
now is existing. It's kind of like this is gonna be super overrating it, but it's kind of like
send it.
seeing a newborn baby, right? Like
Okay.
this life wasn't here before, now it
Right.
is here, it is alive, and it is a thing. It's not just that you get to experience this new life. It's not you saying, "Oh, it was my first newborn that I ever met." No, it's everybody's first time meeting this newborn, this life form, this baby that is coming, that is in its
Everything's new.
infancy.
Everything's first.
Everything is first, and I think that there is a powerful thing to that, and it's really one of the reasons I think that the indie movement is so important, and in trying out non AAA or being a little bit more risky with games and stuff like that, is that you really want, if you can find that experience and provide that experience to players, it will become their new Ocarina of Time. The first time anybody played a MOBA before MOBAs were a thing, I bet some
Wow.
people were like, this is
You can do
groundbreaking.
this.
You can do this. This is crazy. The first VR experience was, this is crazy. This is breaking new ground.
Yeah.
Um, and and that sort of thing being there for that sort of thing is, I, for better or for worse, whether it clouds the greatness or it shines the greatness on Ocarina of Time, is one of the reasons why it's thought of as one of the best games of all time, because it was the first and it did it so well. You're gonna need to cut so much of this out because I'm just repeating the same thing over
No,
and over again.
I don't think so at all. I really don't think so at all. I think you made some really incredible points. I don't want to cut any of it. It's you captured a lot of what I think we were kind of getting at here, and I know we didn't really dive super deep into the nitty gritty of it. And there's a lot of real beautiful things in this game, and maybe it's something we should revisit at another time. I mean, the characters
Mm-hmm.
are incredible and very full and feel very lifelike.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many there's so much optional content in
Yeah.
Ocarina of Time that
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you get it in the same way nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say, oh, back in my day, although I'm getting a little close to the edge with it, but it's from a generation and maybe a full design philosophy that I think kind of went a little bit by the wayside in more recent, maybe the most recent decade or half decade of game design. You know, with something like Rocksteady's like Detective Vision, right?
Mhm.
Or The Witcher's Detective Vision,
Yeah.
or Skyrim's or Oblivion's points on a map, or Assassin's Creed's just crazy full maps full of icons that
Oh,
mean
God,
nothing and
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to a really unique design philosophy and maybe paradigm shift in game development. But here in Ocarina, and I think when you were talking about how everything, like, they really broke new ground here when Miyamoto and Aonuma and Kozumi and Osawa and Yamada and the whole team and Iwawaki designed the game. There was 5 butting heads that wanted to take the game in a million different directions, and Miyamoto wanted to let them all do their thing, and then they all came together and like, wow, this is a fucking mess. And then Miyamoto said, let me clean it up and provide a little bit more strict vision, and kind of took these different ideas that made it such an incredible experience
Mm-hmm.
and made it so unique and something that's worth copying. And I think and you kind of led into this when you were talking about the sound design and Koji Kondo's remixing of songs and sampling of this library of sounds to create something as iconic as the Zelda's Lullaby
Mm-hmm.
or Gerudo Valley or something like that. And there has to be something worth copying to copy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is maybe something that's understated when we get into it, and when we get into discussions of, oh, this is just like this other thing and that's
Mm-hmm.
terrible and we can't ever have something that's like, well, no. There, if there's something worth doing, it's probably worth doing twice, maybe three times, and we can add a lot of nuance to it by iterating on it. Like
Mm.
you're pointing out of points of interest being just within field of vision
Mm-hmm.
is something that people talk about in Breath of the Wild
Yeah.
and Tears of the Kingdom today.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first thing you notice in Elden Ring. You walk out of the cave in Elden Ring, you see White Masked Var, and you immediately see the most unbelievable landscape you've ever seen in a game ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this singular moment that every single person who played Ocarina of Time, Horizon Zero West, Assassin's Creed, everybody has had this singular experience, and it's not just because everybody has to copy Ocarina of Time, but it's because there's something intrinsic about the nature of exploration of of feeling like there's something worth doing, there's something worth seeing, because there's something just within your line of sight, there's something just within your field of view that itches and excites you to explore more. And it's absolutely 100%, like you said, intrinsic to the experience
Mm-hmm.
of Zelda. And even in I think in light of having just done Banjo-Kazooie, right? Another 3D
Mm-hmm.
exploration game with collectathon, which is a collectathon, which there's a little bit of that in
Mm-hmm.
Zelda. But Banjo-Kazooie, in a way, asks you to explore the world through nuanced gameplay. We are constantly doing the same things, and we're going to add one new thing. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
add one new thing. We're going to give you one new ability. In many ways, that was a Super Mario thing. That was a Castlevania thing. That was a Super Metroid thing, and that's something that we see here today too, right? It's something that's intrinsic
Mm-hmm.
to Legend of Zelda, to Ocarina of Time, of adding abilities, of adding powers, and letting you experience the world however you want to do it. It's why I think it's so hard to look at something like Skyrim or look at something like Elden Ring and having played this, not see so clearly the tracks that Miyamoto and Aonuma and the team at Nintendo really laid down for the visual physical language of games
Yeah.
and how it works.
Yeah. So going back to we were talking a little bit beforehand about how the game kinda didn't like break new ground for me from a like this time playing it. I didn't feel like the carpet was pulled underneath me and I am just filled with wonder and this is amazing and oh my god, this is 10 out of 10. That experience didn't happen to me this time.
Yeah.
And but in turn, and this might be just because I've gotten older or anything like that, a lot of the things that I've talked to you about in this and like all these cool things that I've learned have come about from this playthrough being so much more quieter and so much more nuanced and so much more. I've played this is familiar territory and I don't think it's possible for me to be wowed again by this game because I've played it a few times already. But seeing the duct tape, the stitching, the code that
Yeah.
it makes the game kind of made me even more appreciative
Yeah.
of the game this time. So it's one of those
There's like a depth and beauty to it.
depth and beauty to it. Like the first time you see the Grand Canyon, you might be like, "Oh my god, that's beautiful," but maybe the
I've
hundredth
never seen
time,
anything so big.
yeah, the 100th time you see it, you just sit down and contemplate it. You notice that one rock and how the light hits off the ozone layer and how the gradient of the sky as the sun sets changes and all these different. It's a lot more. This time, me playing it has been a lot more contemplative of what is going on around me rather than astoundment, so to speak.
you did a really incredible job putting into words what I think a lot of grad students right now are struggling to understand Immanuel Kant's texts are about, and the idea of sublimity and the power and beauty of sublimity, and the way we perceive and determine things that are beautiful versus things that are unbeautiful or ugly. And it's a nuanced perspective that I think you can only get to, because I didn't have that experience. This was my first time playing through it.
That's fair.
I was honestly a little frustrated with some of my experiences playing through the game as somebody who, I felt like a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
There's almost an aspect of homework to it for me, and I didn't want to get into that because I felt like that wasn't fair to the game in this playthrough. That's not what I was trying to convey, but it was there. It was real. But it is still something that I'm very thankful that I played through, and I'm very happy that I got to experience, because it's allowed me to better understand and appreciate what some of my favorite game designers today are really looking back at as the fundamentals and understanding. Yeah, there's the beauty and wonderment and the sublime awe of hitting Hyrule Field for the first time. You can't really match that experience. But then there's something really, really beautiful about the way that you only have 5 notes and you can play 10 songs with them, and you're allowed to just sit there with the ocarina out and do whatever you want. You don't just hit a button and play a song. The game asks you to do the thing. It asks you to it gamifies the puzzle solving of the puzzle. If that makes sense. Like, the solution to the puzzle is a puzzle in and of itself. Do you remember the song?
How much do you think it'll cost us to get William to compose our outro for this podcast using only those 5 notes?
I think we should thank him profusely and take care of him for doing the job that we had him to do for the intro first. No, it's I think that would be a very interesting task, and it's one that I would be interested in talking to him about on here, maybe, where we can talk about maybe he could do like a short composition and see like the different ways that you can do it. I'm sure it's an exercise that is practiced before. I'm sure this isn't new. This isn't totally new ground. Certainly not anymore, but. Anyway, I want to thank you for playing this game with me.
Of course.
Spending some time thinking about Ocarina of Time and talking about it with me today.
I am so happy to be here for your first time finishing Ocarina of Time. It is exciting to talk to somebody about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's one that I felt like was always missing in my understanding and my sort of required reading list of this, especially as somebody who grew up with it and never really got to experience it. And being able to talk about it with you has really helped me appreciate it more, despite even the speed bumps I felt along the way and the frustrations I felt along the way, because there's really something incredible about it. And there's something that's maybe unlike a lot of other games that we could have played or even on this list. So with that, I think we should wrap it up here. So next on our list, we're going to start working on, we're going to start working on Undertale for our next game. It's one that I don't know who recommended it to me. It may be one that I threw on there, but it's a game that I skipped when it came out because I was a very edgy college student who didn't want to do anything that anyone else was doing. I wanted to be a cool kid, and so I missed it. Have you started playing it? Have you played it before?
I have not finished it before. It is a game that I have started like 3 times and never have finished it. So I am both scared and excited to try again.
Yes.
And see if I will finally finish it. It's a short game. So yes, I think I've gotten like more than half of the game through, and for some reason I stopped, and I do not know why. I really don't remember why I stopped.
I am excited to maybe figure out where and why you stopped last time.
I think I remember where, but and that's why I'm confounded as to that part wasn't that bad. Like it wasn't frustrating or anything. So yeah, I'm excited to check it out. I've played it like started it like 3 times. How about you?
Okay.
Well, you already mentioned you haven't played it. You were
I
too
have
cool
not played
for
it.
school.
I played Anodyne, which I think is
Oh.
similar.
Okay.
I didn't finish that either,
Okay.
mind you. I did not love Anodyne, but I am familiar with that song that everybody knows from yeah,
Which is a bop,
incredible.
honestly. Honestly, it is quite a bop, even though the memes have
it's a
killed
real
it.
killer. I'm looking forward to sort of understanding why it's so important and ignoring the memes about it in spite of it. And I'm most excited to talk to you about Undertale and just indie games as a whole because I feel like Undertale is a really important part of the history in the history of indie games as a maybe I want to say resurgence, but I'll say it's probably more of the birth of the indie game movement and the Steam Greenlight and just an entirely it feels very indicative of a changing or a watershed moment in how games are played and appreciated and understood. And I don't want to get into it right now because we should save it.
Oh, we have another hour and a half right now, right? So
yeah, we can just bang that out on a weeknight. No, all right. So, Fran, where can our lovely fans, our dear listeners, find you?
You can find in the website formerly known as Twitter, El_Fantastico. I don't post there anymore, so I guess don't follow me there.
Follow him there.
Follow me there. I want to get super popular there now that I've left. Twitch.tv _El_Fantastico as well. Threads El_Fantastico. Pretty much either Fantastico or El_Fantastico everywhere.
Awesome. And you can find me at useyouritems.wordpress.com on my blog. Feel free to email either of us at useyouritems@gmail.com. And you can also find me on twitch.tv at Wobi_Con, KON, WOBI. If that doesn't work, we might even get a new Twitch channel going for the two of us to share. And we're working on that. There might be a Discord in the near future too. Ooh. So we'll there's a few things on the horizon. But as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining us. And please, whatever you do, use your items.